considering sailing on the Norwegian Prima or a Prima class ship and have always wanted to hear an honest review, especially from someone who's not an influencer and will never be invited on a ship to give a glowing review? Well, then this video is for you. I'd like to share with you the top 5 things I hated and the top 5 things I loved about the Norwegian Prima. And you'll find out what they lied to me about because I'm still mad about it 2 years later. My name is Amy and welcome to my channel. I love to travel and I love sharing my travel experiences with you. Let me give you a little background about the Norwegian Prima, just in case you're not familiar. The Norwegian Prima is the first in Norwegian Cruise Line's Prima class of ships. It's their largest and flagship vessel. It holds about 3,099 passengers at double occupancy and about 1,500 crew members. Now, Norwegian ships are aimed at a wide variety of passengers, including families, couples, and singles, ranging from ages about 30 to 60. They have been growing their market share for the solo cruiser with the introduction of the solo studio cabins for quite a while now. Now, I have sailed on the Norwegian Prima once in 2023 for 12 nights, leaving Southampton, England, with an itinerary that included Norway and Iceland. It was really a magical trip. And I did sail on that trip solo, and I put in a bid for a balcony cabin, and I was upgraded to a handicap accessible room with an obstructed view balcony from a solo studio cabin. Now, this trip was a little bit expensive because I booked it so far in advance, and I ended up paying about $340 per night. And I sailed the Prima a second time in February of 2024 out of Galveston, Texas, on a 7 night Western Caribbean cruise that visited Mexico, Honduras, and Belize. I sailed this trip with 2 other adults, and we shared a standard balcony cabin. Because I shared this trip with 2 other friends, I didn't put much out of pocket. I think I spent about $800 on my portion of cruise fare and gratuities. I really enjoyed my time with my friends, but I don't think I would sail with more than 2 people in a standard cabin in the future. Because once you open the sofa bed, there was only about 3 inches between the end of the bed and the desk, and you couldn't walk from the other beds in the room to the bathroom. So basically, when anybody had to get up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, the person sleeping on the sofa bed was disturbed as well. Now, both of my cabins were near the rear elevators, not to be confused with the Haven elevators. Now, I did this because I wanted to be closer to the indulged food hall, the local, and the main dining room. And I really did love this location because there was also a bar right in front of the main dining room that had great live music every day. So, after 19 nights aboard this vessel, I have some pretty good opinions about the ship. So, let's get right into the top 5 things I hated about the Norwegian Prima. Number 5, the seating. Now, I do want to preface this with saying that I do have a pretty bad back injury, so sitting for me is always difficult, but the seating on this ship really left a lot to be desired. Being only 5 foot tall, it was often difficult to find seating where my feet touched the ground, or I could actually lean back in the seat without straining my back. And Prima's furniture was really on a whole nother level of just kind of difficult to get comfortable in. And the only seating that I found was comfortable was in the main dining room. It seemed like all the other furniture was built for people who were 6'5" or above, and there didn't seem to be any in between. I saw many regular sized and tall passengers struggle with the seating too. And it seemed to be a running joke that there were not nearly enough throw pillows to go around. Also, the seating in the main atrium was severely lacking. Norwegian's expectation that the atrium was going to be the main hub for everyone to gather for musical entertainment was really not supported by the furniture arrangement, or really the lack of furniture. It only had a handful of places to sit, and it was poorly laid out. I often witnessed people camping out at least an hour in advance of the musical act to ensure that they got a chair to sit in. The furniture in the atrium was constantly being rearranged by the guests to make it more usable, so it was pretty much a disaster zone most of the time. and the large white couches in the center seemed to be only useful as a jungle gym to the unattended children. Number four, the entertainment venues were just way too small. Now, I knew this going in, I'd seen it in many reviews, and I was never able to attend a show in either the Improv or Sid Norman's. Reservations were always sold out, and I did not have the patience or the ability to stand for more than an hour in line to wait and see if I could get in. Now, the venue, even if you got in, would be extremely crowded, and it was standing room only. I did play trivia in Sid Norman's, so I did see the inside of the venue, and I found it was poorly designed and lacked the seating, and it was not appropriate for the size of ship that I was on. I really think someone fell in love with the poorly designed concept when they decided to build the ship, and I think Norwegian's goal to have the small intimate spaces was not executed properly. And for what should have been the best spot on the ship, the observation lounge, it was just very difficult to use. Unless you got there well before food was being served, it was always massively overcrowded. There was a constant flow of people coming in looking for a seat, and they were always visibly disgruntled at the end because they had to end up leaving the venue. And it was often closed for private events, so that would leave you no place on the ship to sit down and relax and have a great view of the ocean unless you wanted to be outside. The number three thing I hated was the state of my room, the absence of my room steward, and the miserable crew. On both sailings, my rooms were dirty, with obvious large food crumbs around the edges of all of the furniture. Everything was dusty and needed a good clean. And on my second trip, there was a 2 foot swath of toothpaste smeared across my bathroom mirror that was never cleaned off in the entire 7 day voyage. Now, all of us in the room refused to clean it off. We wanted to see how long it would stay there. And I guess the joke was on us because it stayed there the whole trip. And like I mentioned earlier, I sailed a total of 19 nights over 2 cruises, and neither time I saw my room steward. And I seriously mean not a single time did I see either steward. Now, prior to both sailings, I requested distilled water for a CPAP machine, and I even filled out a form on the website, and I didn't receive it either time. I had to request it again when I got on board. And on my second sailing with the three travelers, they did not separate the beds as we had requested in advance. I know this is small and nitpicky, but what's the point of me requesting it in advance if they're not going to bother to do it? Now, regarding the rest of the crew, on my European cruise, they were absolutely miserable. There was no smiling, no engaging with the customers, and a general overall unpleasant disposition among the crew, except for Simon, the cruise director. Now, many of the staff were visibly sick to the point of sneezing, coughing, and runny noses, all the while serving food. And of course, inevitably, a large portion of the guests on the sailing became ill, including myself. Number two, lack of free water and open beverage stations. I know this sounds weird, but I really struggled to find an open beverage station on the ship. The ones in the buffet and the indulged food hall were only open when they were serving food, and honestly, you were lucky if they were working when they were open. There were beverage stations out on the pool deck, but I never saw those open during either sailing. And I only drink water, and the bartenders refused to give me a glass of water when I asked. They said I had to buy a carton of water if I wanted something to drink. So I would often resort to going into the local to get an appetizer just so I could get a glass of water. And the number one thing I hated about the Norwegian Prima was they lied. NCL sold an itinerary for well over a year with a port on that itinerary that they knew the ship could not sail into. The dredging of the port in Isefjordur was not complete, and the Prima was too big to use the dock. Since the ship does not tender, it meant that the port was canceled for more than a year and a half on every single sailing, and they never removed it from the itinerary the entire time. And NCL did not provide any communication to me directly that the port would be canceled or that there was never any ability to dock. I did not receive an email in advance. I was not told when I checked in at Southampton. I only heard about the cancellation in advance through a private Facebook group for the sailing. When I was on board, I wasn't officially notified until well into the cruise. The captain never addressed it, and I never received a refund of port fees or any other compensation. which makes me wonder if they didn't even bother collecting the port fees in advance because they knew they couldn't dock there. I wouldn't be so angry about it if it was just a standard port, but it was the gateway to the Dinjandi waterfall, which is perhaps one of the most spectacular waterfalls in all of Iceland. If I go back to visit, it's at least a 5 hour drive from Reykjavik, but it would have only been an hour trip from the cruise port. And honestly, it was one of the main reasons I booked this particular at sailing on NCL. I don't think this is acceptable behavior from any cruise line, and it would have been nice to have at least received some type of cruise credit for missing the port, especially since the itinerary was false advertisement. Now, don't let the things I hated about this ship deter you from giving it a try. Remember, these are just my opinions and my experiences, and the things that I've gone over may not bother you at all. And I didn't hate everything about the Norwegian Prima, so let's get into the top 5 things that I loved about the ship. Number 5. While I did take issue with a lot of the seating on the ship, the different types of padded loungers and sofas out on deck provided an excellent choice of seating for those who didn't want to lay in a regular lounge chair. Most of it was decently comfortable, but a lot of it was built for very tall and only able bodied people in mind. When I did manage to find a place to get comfortable, it was really lovely to sit outside and read my book in the sun without having to be anywhere near the crowded and noisy pool deck. And I really love the area at the rear of the ship behind the indulged food hall. It didn't seem that this area was ever terribly busy, even if the indulged food hall was filled to the brim. Number 4, the Prima Theater. The seats were very comfortable and the stage was always visible, no giant pillars to block your view, and I felt the theater was large enough to accommodate the amount of people that wanted to attend. I never had an issue finding a seat as long as I was there 15 minutes early. And I was able to enter the theater and get a seat without having to walk down more than one single stair. I also thought it was really innovative of Norwegian to include some sofas along the edges to be more size and disability inclusive. I think other cruise lines could learn from this style of theater. Number 3, the view from the observation lounge. This venue was not without its challenges, but it was really the best place on the ship if you wanted to watch the sea go by and you didn't want to be outside. One tip is to make sure that you get there about 30 minutes before they start serving the afternoon snacks. Anytime I did this, I was pretty much guaranteed to get a front row seat to the windows. And there were also a few small tables really meant for beverages, but they were just big enough to play a card game on or put together a small puzzle. Number 2, the indulged food hall and the local. I really enjoyed the concept of the indulged food hall. It's like going to a tapas restaurant with all of these wonderful choices available. The majority of the food items I tried were really great, and the hidden gems were the gnocchi and the grilled brown sugar pineapple. I really liked that there was such a diverse menu offering, and you didn't have to get in line at the teeny tiny buffet and elbow everybody out of the way to get your food. The local had great food choices. Most of the items I had were better than the main dining room, and they had extended hours, which was wonderful for someone like me who likes to eat at very odd times. And I was a huge fan of their hot fudge sundae. It was a very popular item, especially late at night. And finally, the number one thing I loved about the Norwegian Prima was the interior design. The decor and the interior design of the ship was absolutely beautiful. I love the alcohol ink on all of the wallpapers. The carpets had a very pleasing pattern with a modern color scheme, and the infinity mirror in the elevators was mesmerizing. And overall, I just really loved the vibe of the ship. It felt elegant and classy without feeling out of date or aimed at a much older audience. I also really loved the layout of the bathrooms in the cabins. Since I stayed in both a handicap accessible room and a standard room, let me just quickly go over both types. The handicap accessible bathroom was still very useful for an able bodied person and was very well laid out. It was an exceptionally large room with absolutely zero lip to get in the large shower. And the drainage was excellent. Little to no water went past the drain at the edge of the shower. And that's a common problem when you're using a zero lip shower. And I do have to give them a shout out for the tile on the bathroom floor. It was 100% non slip, no matter how much water you got on it. The standard bathrooms were also well designed, and it's my favorite bathroom layout of all cruises I've been on so far. The showers were spacious with excellent water pressure and had plenty of grab bars. When you turned on the water, you didn't get wet while you were trying to adjust the temperature, and there were no big puddles of water on the floor when you opened the door after you showered. And it was easy to dry off in the bathroom with the door closed, which for me was important because I was on that sailing. I was traveling with two other adults and I needed my privacy to dry off and get dressed. I didn't discuss the quality of Prima's food in this list because I didn't think it warranted top 5 status like it did with Royal Caribbean. Food on a ship is very important to me because if I'm going to be trapped on board, I need to enjoy the only food I have access to. The Indulged Food Hall and the local were both consistent over my cruises, and I found multiple items on each menu that I really enjoyed and regularly ordered. But I had two very different experiences in the dining room. Hudson's is an absolutely gorgeous dining room, the most beautiful that I've seen on all of the 7 cruise ships I've been on. And the view is absolutely spectacular. I truly enjoyed dining in the venue, especially at Sail Away. However, on the European sailing, the staff were miserable and it showed in their food presentation. I never received a meal that was anything more than room temperature, including the soup. The taste of the dishes was just okay, and the food from that trip would have never inspired me to return to the ship. The staff were also quite put out when I didn't order additional pay items or beverages that would include an additional tip. I was often ignored and received very poor service unless I did. However, my experience on the Caribbean sailing was much improved. The staff were lovely, and the food temperature was warm to hot. They did offer the same menu on both sailings, so there was no change there. But I knew what dishes to avoid at this point, so it made my experience on my second cruising much more pleasant. But for the French onion soup lovers, there's nothing that's going to save their version. It literally looked like dishwater and didn't have much flavor. Royal Caribbean's version put it to shame. Overall, I really enjoyed my time on the Norwegian Prima, but that was mainly because of the ports I visited. While I thought the ship was exceptionally beautiful and the bathrooms were very well laid out, the uncomfortable seating and ridiculous design of the music and comedy venues would stop me from booking the ship again. I think I would rate my experience a 6 out of 10, and I would not return to this style of ship unless I received a massively discounted price like I did on my second sailing. If you've been on the Norwegian Prima or one of its newer sister ships, let me know what you loved or hated about the ship. Just drop it in the comments below. If you love everything to do with cruising, make sure to check out my other cruise videos, including how I turned $400 in casino play into $3,000 worth of savings on 3 Royal Caribbean cruises. And be on the lookout for a future video about the 5 things I hated and loved about Royal Caribbean's Icon of the Seas. And next up after that, I'll be releasing a head-to-head comparison of the Norwegian Prima and the Icon of the Seas, the 2 flagship vessels from these competing lines. If you'd like to help my channel grow, make sure you hit that like button. And subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. Thank you for watching and have a fabulous day. And remember, if you seek Amy, you might find her on a cruise. Happy cruising, y'all!